So, what role do you think films have in simplifying ideas like this, like world federalism, pacifism, and propagating the same? And a lot of times in the process, these ideas tend to get compromised, or maybe the essence of the ideas may get diluted. So, what do you think on this?
I don't know if they get diluted. I think if you do it well, that's not necessarily true, because the core of the idea is actually, I mean, I was fairly long-winded just then describing, the problems. The core of the idea isn't that complicated. It's simply to have, just as you have levels of government in India, where your city presumably has a municipal government, and then your state has a government, and then above that, the sovereign state of India has a government based in Delhi. The similar is true in my country. We have a federal system with provinces and cities. My city of Toronto has a government, and the province of Ontario has a government, and above that is the national government of Canada based in Ottawa. Same is true of the United States. So this is a model, a federal model, which is really not that hard to understand. I don't think you're diluting it or compromising it simply by presenting the people who are suggesting the same thing for the world. I don't think it's a very difficult idea, or just the image of the whole earth, and to look at the obvious problems. And so I don't necessarily agree that it's yeah, there are all kinds of subtleties and difficulties. I mean, do world federalists want to have a democratic parliamentary assembly inside the United Nations, or do they want to sort of do it digitally outside, or maybe that's unimportant to have a world assembly? Or, sure, that's all interesting questions. And what is the nature of a world? How powerful should there be a world army? Or is the whole idea ridiculous? Or is the whole idea just, is it going to turn into a tyranny? Those are all fairly basic. There are details that you can get into, but the basic idea and the basic criticisms of the idea aren't that difficult, really. And I think a film is good at giving an emotional basis through both fear of the bad outcomes and a hope, the vision. So I don't necessarily think it compromises if it's done well. And there are examples of film. Michael Moore, an American filmmaker, has made a number of documentaries, one about healthcare in the United States, that sort of put it on the agenda, that really have made a difference in terms of public health systems and, the Obama health system in the United States. As most countries, most developed, most rich countries have public health systems, public health insurance, not the United States, or it has, but piecemeal. And so anyway, the point is that a documentary did push that forward. It can have a big impact. Fiction films can have a big impact. There's just a couple of films, The Judgment at Nuremberg and The Diary of Anne Frank, had a big impact on, the murder of the Jews, the mass murder of the Jews, the genocide perpetrated by the Nazi Germany. It wasn't that well known, it wasn't that well understood. Those films made a big difference to it.
Yeah, indeed.
So films can have a big impact, tremendous big impact.
In fact, a film of this sort which had a big impact on me was The World Is My Country, directed by Arthur Changes. That's on Gary Davis, world citizen #1, who has established the World Services Authority. That's currently the World Citizen Government, and it's headed by David Galler. So have you watched that film?
Yes, I have seen. I know Arthur, and I have seen the film. Yeah, in fact, I wrote to Gary Davis 20 years ago when I first wanted to do this film, because I thought his story was so interesting, and I think Arthur was already working on it. So it didn't, that didn't go anywhere. And I'm debating whether I should include that story in my film. I don't know, but yeah, I've seen the film. Mm-hmm.
So what's your review of the film?
Well, I think it's a great story. I think it's one of the most interesting stories. It doesn't go forward to I mean, Gary's experience doesn't go forward to the present crisis, which is more salient than it. Well, I shouldn't say more salient than it was in the 1940s, because it was incredibly important then. And so I think that there's room for other films. I mean, the tone of it is that, you know, the animation and so forth isn't quite the style that I would, you know, pursue.
Mhm.
But it's a great story.
Yeah, indeed. And I don't know, these films, they're supposed to be telecast worldwide, and maybe they could reach out to a wider audience, because with a lot of difficulty, I came across this film, and that was really difficult to come across this film in the first place and watch it. So I would have really looked forward to something which is more easily accessible and reachable to the youth, because this film certainly inspired me a lot. And then I read more about Davis and his work, and that's how I currently am propelled in this field.
Oh, I see. So the film was really significant for you.
Yeah, it was.
Uh-huh. Well, good. That's answers your question, that films can have a big impact.
Surely do have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be great if it was more easily available.
Mm-hmm. So, as a filmmaker, again, coming to your difficulties, you must have faced excessive censorship, or maybe red tapeism is something you told me already about, like getting permissions and working on the films. Have you faced any difficulties such as excessive censorship? And the connected question is, how good is Canada's freedom of expression?
Well, it's legally it's good, very good, but films require money, and you know, in this environment where everybody has a voice, where YouTube exists, Instagram exists, the problem is being heard above the noise, and that's not censorship exactly, but there is a kind of a, not exactly censorship, but there is a just, the power of money is very significant. So a very big broadcaster or media company like Sky, for instance, has enormous power to shape the conversation, and will shape it in the direction that its owners want it to be shaped. That's true, of course, also in countries like China and Russia, where the state has more control over communication. The internet and, you know, those media such as, you know, Twitter and YouTube and so forth, have a lot of power from the ground up, but that can be exaggerated. You know, the power of the state is still very strong. I mean, you look at 10 years ago, what happened in Tahrir Square in Egypt, if you recall, and the Arab Spring movement. People thought, well, we're just going to organize with YouTube and Facebook and so forth, and we'll have a movement. But, you know, we'll go to the square and we'll all get together. But you could see that there were two organizations which really had organization, and those were the Muslim Brotherhood and the army, and that's who was going to win. So the power of the state, the power of the money to shape the conversation is still very, very great, and it's not that easy to introduce new things, to introduce, if you like, radical ideas, or radical not in the sense of violent or extremist, but just new. So so there's freedom of expression, absolutely, but the big media outlets are controlled by very few in this
Mhm.
country.
So in this case, crowdfunding doesn't work.
It could, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are examples of that. Yeah. Um, I actually have never done it, so I don't really know. This country has good state support for independent, for documentaries. We're quite lucky, actually, in Canada. Yeah.
And what does the Canadian crowd think about the idea of a world government, specifically the Canadian crowd?
The population here, what do they think? I don't think they think about it at all. I don't think, although it's interesting because people, when you do talk about it, they say, yeah, that makes sense, or they don't.
But that's surprising because
I think that they're, sorry?
no, that's actually surprising because we have a branch of the World Federalist movement in Canada, and that's very
Yeah,
active.
there's, well, Canada, in a sense, sort of like India, but India is so big, it doesn't really fit in the same mold. But Canada's, kind of a middle power, that it's a rich country, but it's small, certainly small compared to India, and it's small compared to our neighbor to the south. It's about a 1/9 or 1/10 the size in population. So it's always had, it's always in the interest of middle powers to go for an international order because we're weak. So we need the group to have any strength. Whereas the nuclear armed United States, with the dominant military, half the military spending in the world is the United States, 50%. All the other countries combined are about equal.
Mhm.
So that's monstrously huge, and they can dominate, whereas Canada can't. So Canada has a tradition of let's all get together and do things together. So that comes out of that. But as far as the general population, no. But it's changing a bit, I think. I think it's changing a bit. I think people are much more aware, especially with the climate crisis. And when we start to reflect on the pandemic, when we get out of it, if we ever get out of it, then I think that will have an effect too. And Canada is an interesting country because it is probably the most diverse country on the planet. Because there are lots of other cities like mine, like London and Paris and so forth, that are very diverse, but they always have this, well, you're French or you're not French in Paris, right? Whereas in Canada, we're all immigrants. We all stole this country together. So I think Toronto is actually a very interesting model for the future of the planet. There's every ethnicity in this city.
Yeah.
As we were saying earlier, there are a couple of million, oh, not a couple of million, but I mean, people of Asian ancestry in Canada form, I don't know, a fifth of the country. So the whole world is, especially in my city, the whole world is here. So I don't think there's a potential. There's a potential.
Indeed, and especially when an immigrant or a rather recent immigrant, Jagmeet Singh, happens to be one of the major politicians of the country.
Yes, he's an Indo-Canadian of the Sikh faith. He's a progressive, a social democrat.
That's great. So, are you personally involved with any World Federalist organizations?
No, because I attend it. Situations like this, or I go to attend a conference, or I'm in touch with and I interview people and I talk to people, a lot of people. But it's important for a filmmaker to be a little bit removed, so you can. So it's not a. So I don't want to make propaganda. And so, I don't want to be, oh, here's a, it's like it becomes then sort of a corporate video, a video for promoting something, which I guess it is in a way, because I do think it's an interesting idea. But filmmaker has to be a little bit objective.
Yeah, that's a really
Fair.
there's a difference between a propaganda film and an account of something. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But overall, do you agree with the idea of a world federation, or do you think that there's something better, some improvement is possible in the idea?
Well, I mean, as I said, I can see the logic of it. The dangers that people fear that it would be that it's impossible for, people from China, India, and Brazil to have anything much in common. Those kind of arguments. How would it possibly work? It's so complicated. It's so, interests are so divergent. How would you get there? How do you get to it, without, because nation states, sovereign states are almost all formed by violence. They're formed by acts of might, not right. The right comes later. And how do we, is it possible to achieve anything like that without a massive violence or without a massive crisis, like, a nuclear war? Is it possible? I don't know. If we did have it, would it be, and it had enforcement? Would that be some kind of tyranny? Would it be very negative? So to say, are there any improvements? I guess I'm a step back from that, saying, is this a good idea? Is it a good idea? Is it possible, and how? So I'm sure there are all kinds of ways that it could be improved, but it's not my job to be an advocate in any kind of one direction. It's my job to kind of document it and examine it fairly and interestingly with some, with an obvious bias that there's something interesting here. I'm not just going to make a film and say, wow, what a load of shit this is.
Yeah. And do you think that the taste of the contemporary audience is deteriorating and the world is less appreciative of quality films? And you said that in the beginning that when it comes to documentaries, you generally tend to earn less commercially. So do you think that tells something about us and the society as a whole?
Well, documentaries have always earned less. They've always been, for a smaller group of people. Although there are, documentaries that really do very well. I mean, whether they're nature documentaries or, as I was saying earlier, Michael Moore's films in the United States. So no, if you're asking, are you asking basically, is the world dumber? Is not as responsive to thoughtful?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that there's an assumption that among the people that control the media, that they do tend to go towards stupid. They do tend, because they can get larger numbers of people. And there's also an unfortunate thing in social media that is like playing on people's desire to get quick emotional hits. The algorithms that Facebook uses, the algorithms that I think less so with other media, but certainly, because it's easy to arouse anger, it's easy to arouse fear, that people have tended to go that direction. But at the same time, like I turn on YouTube, I'll look at YouTube, and there are these little history documentaries that people have made just spontaneously, or they've made or little pieces that little short films they've made. A lot of them are really smart and really good and really interesting and really new ideas and outside the mainstream. So that's happening too. So and generally speaking, no, the world is not dumber. The world is smarter. That's actually, there's evidence for that. People score better on IQ tests than they used to. It's kind of interesting. People are better educated all the time. There are more girls in school than there ever were before. Well, the pandemic's a setback, but we'll get back to it.
Hopefully the pandemic, we recover from the pandemic sometime.
Sure, we will. We always have. You know, the humans and all animals have been through lots of attacks by viruses, and somehow we still survive.
So lastly, what suggestion would you provide to all those young people out there who wish to make a career in the film and documentary industry?
Well, make films. It's not hard to do. If you have a phone, if you're rich enough to own a phone, and if you have a computer, it helps, you can just go out and start filming. And there are schools you can go to and so forth if you can. There's very good ones in India, actually. Yes, of course, there are all kinds of economic barriers. But if you can get a hold of a phone with a camera, you're on your way. And the other thing is to meet people. Find people who are doing it. Go work for them. Show up on time. Be nice. Work hard.
So you personally, have you pursued a higher education in filmmaking and acting, or?
No, I didn't. I had a degree in psychology, and I just started acting. And I did do classes, but I never had a formal university training, anything like that. I was never in a university program for film or acting or writing. Just sort of started doing it.
That's great, because your films, one won an Emmy Award and the other one was nominated, and you don't have a formal education in theater or the filmmaking industry. That's really very interesting. And
I guess so, yeah. There's quite a lot of people like that, but there's nothing wrong with going to a formal education. Because actually I did one semester at a film school when I was about 19. Yeah, I did, but I quit. I was confused about what I wanted to do, so I quit. But yeah, so I did do one semester.
That's great. So it was an honor talking to you, Barry.
It was a real pleasure talking to you, Omkaar. Very, very nice.
So to all
it's always good to do that, because it helps you formulate your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. And meeting new people like you and getting to know about your work and the amount of efforts you're putting in for the cause of spreading the word about the idea of a world government, I really appreciate that. And apart from that, I respect your opinion on the idea that you don't want it to be a propaganda, but more of a exploration into the idea, more of an inquiry into the idea. So my best wishes to your film, How to Rule the World. And I believe that this film will get adequate number of sponsors, because the topic it's talking about, that's really great. And to all the viewers who are watching this video, thanks a lot for watching it till the end. I'll be sharing the link of Barry's film, The Offspring, the Vimeo link of that in the description. And please do subscribe to the channel to stay updated for future videos and interviews like this. And have a nice day ahead, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Omkaar. And maybe I can interview you when I go to camera.
Yeah, that would be surely a great honor for me. It would be a pleasure.
Thank you.